I'm working on the messaging project again, and I have had some time to think about that. I have a few ideas, so let's get right into it. Last time I stopped at the handler. I was working with SQS, and there was the question, how do I write my handlers? I mean, what would be the API for users? And I thought about it. I decided that I want handlers to not be decoupled from like SQS or EventBridge. I've decided that it's fine to let me take that example. So I had the generate report event or job, and I had the handler like this. Those were two examples here. So I decided that instead of having a magic method like this, where I take the class already deserialized, I would extend I would extend like the SQS handler. Why? The features and what you will do with SQS will not necessarily be the same of what you do with EventBridge. So for example, just one example. With SQS, you can process messages in batch. With EventBridge, when Lambda is invoked, you get only one event. So we could have the bridge that would invoke this method several times if there were 10 messages in the batch. But the advantage of having a batch processing is, for example, to process those jobs in parallel and then maybe have a transaction over all the batch messages and do a single insert into the database. That's just an example, but that's one thing that you may want to do. So losing the batch thing here, where here I can do get records, and then like let's say I build my SQL query, whatever, and then at the end I insert, or items. Anyway, you get the point. I want to do a single insert, so that wouldn't be possible. Another reason is with SQS you have some features, like you can manually delete the message from SQS if you wanted, again with the batch method, if you want to process only half of the jobs. You can maybe want to requeue a specific message and change its visibility. So SQS is very powerful, and with EventBridge you just get the event and you have to deal with it immediately. So I thought that I don't need to make that magic. Furthermore, the magic was about mostly deserializing the object. And when you think about it, it's okay. So this would be the actual domain logic, what you want to do whenever there's a report to generate, then you generate your report, right? And this is the domain code. And that code could go into a specific class in your domain classes, in your model directory, whatever the name is. And that part is like dealing with SQS. And that's like a controller, an HTTP controller. There's a best practice, which is you don't put your domain logic in your controller. The controller is just there to handle the HTTP request and call your domain code. And so the controller is like coupled to the HTTP format and HTTP protocol. And here you would be coupled in that handler, coupled to the SQS objects and protocol, and that's okay. It's okay to be coupled at some point. You don't have to make everything decoupled. So that's why I thought, well, okay, that's fine. I can have, in reality, that most probably you'll have to have. So I don't like those names. Those are very generic names, but that's fine. That's just for the example, okay? So this one would be the domain service, and I don't care about PHP stan. I don't care about SQS, and that. Oh, come on. That is your domain service. It's not related to Bref. It's not related to SQS, and that's generic. And I can actually call that generate. That's even better. I have more freedom on what I can do here. And so in my handler that is specific to SQS, okay, in there, I can inject the service and just forward the generate report. And so now we are getting into, so let's forget about batch thing. We are getting into, you know, deserializing stuff, which is good. Well, that's a void thing, so I don't know why. Anyway, we need to go from an SQS record to a generate report thing. So I thought that we could have helpers to help, you know, the serializer. We could have helpers to deserialize objects. And on top of that, we sometimes may want again to delete the message manually or to requeue it, to change its, you know, to requeue it with a delay and whatever. So we could have like an advanced, so this is the official Bref class, right? We could have an advanced SQS handler or have a trait or inject a helper. So I'm not sure yet which solution it will be. So for now, I will just create if I create an abstract class, so this is a bit like this one. So this one is unused, right? I will rename it like advanced. Oh, not the file, the class. And I think you may remember that class from the previous video. I made that and I said, oh, that's not working because I need to inject stuff, so it will impact the child constructor here, which is messing up everything. So I shouldn't use inheritance. Makes sense. Okay. So maybe what I need is keep the SQS handler and have the messaging, I don't know, SQS helper. We'll rename that SQS helper. And that's already a property. So I will create that class. So that class is useless now. What I can do is keep those injections because I will need actually only the serializer. And that class is useless now, right? What we will have is, okay, so you may be wondering, why don't I inject the serializer directly, but we'll have several methods. So let's start with one. Deserialize and come on, this will be a record, SQS record, right? And we need the class name, and we'll return an object. Oops. Yeah, so this method will exist eventually. Now, in our SQS handler, we inject the helper, and we can finally do the serialize record. And the class name will be generate report class. However, it will be like get body. There we go. Now we will have more helper methods like requeue, and that will be a record. Not sure again about the exact signature of the method, but that's just to give you an idea. Why do I get this warning? Anyway, so I have to write SQS specific handlers, but that's okay because it's just like a controller, and I can put my domain logic into a specific service, right? So this is just this directory is just the example. Now I was trying to organize my thoughts. So why this library will exist to serialize objects. So the jobs and events, and deserialize them. We will see about that, and local development. So I thought, so these are the drivers that we will support. And yeah, these are the features I want to maybe add. So batch processing, that's batch dispatch and batch processing. This is what I mentioned. With the SQS handler, I want to be able to process multiple records. Now, how do I deal? And I thought about that rate limiting. This is a very, very common problem. I hear that all the time from companies and clients that use SQS and Lambda. And they're like, how can I make sure that... so I have a worker that sends emails to my customers. And I want to send maximum 100 emails per minute to each customer because they have like, I don't want to be flagged as a spam by them, and they have like a single email server. So that's something I've heard before. So I want to send, if I have 10 customers, I want to send 1000 messages a minute, but only 100 per client, per customer. So I want to rate limit per customer. Or it could be, I want to rate limit number, jobs per customer is the best example. So, of course, this is a feature that is supported by Laravel queues. They use a cache driver. I had a look at the Symfony framework and Symfony Messenger, and they recently added a rate limiter component. And that component is very interesting. Let me remove some noise. Very interesting because, as always with Symfony, it's a component that can be used with the framework, but also that can be used independently. And I had a look, okay, so that's the Laravel framework, and I had a look at the Symfony component. And yeah, it's a standalone component. So I think it's completely usable in Lambda, and one way to use it would be, so here's my SQS handler, and I want to allow customers to generate reports, maximum 1 per minute, or 1 per hour, whatever. So I handle the records here, and I can say, so this would be a helper, is throttled, and that would be, if is throttled, then I requeue the record because I don't want to process it now, and I return. Oh no, sorry, I continue to the next record. So that method would be like, I use a key to identify a single, so that would be a customer ID, for example. It can be any string. So then it's up to users to come up with their throttling identifiers. So here it could be like generate report client ID. And we need a way to configure, like when you have a rate limiter, you configure the policy. For example, 10 records per 15 minutes. So I think, I'm not sure how to do it properly. Or maybe I need to inject a rate limiter component separately, right? And that one can be configured. I'm not sure yet. Or could be rate limiter like 10 every 15 minutes, or in our case it was 1 per hour, 1 report per hour. And then we can check, is it throttled? And if it is, will requeue. So I think that kind of API is really, really clear. I mean, using a rate limiter is complex. So it's as clear as it can be, I think. And that's the report rate limiter, just to be more clear. And we can even say, okay, I want to add a delay, like requeue or I'm not sure if it's actually requeue, it's like delay for 30 minutes more, where it could be 10 minutes if you want to be more flexible. Anyway, you get the point. So these features, again, are possible because I'm doing something specific to SQS, and I like being able to do that. This is orchestration, like it's not domain logic, right? And that belongs in the controller or SQS handler, not in your domain code. So I think it's a good idea to keep having that coupling to SQS, and then it's up to you to decouple your domain logic. Of course, if you have a very simple project, you don't have to decouple. You can do your domain logic here, right? It's not it's a rule. It's meant to be broken. Batch dispatch. So right, this one I think we need. So I thought we could have, the obvious answer would be to have batch dispatch or dispatch many, and then you have an array of messages, right? But we have PHP 8 and we have fun stuff in PHP, and I think it can be something like this. That means that, let me grab Scratch. Oh, I will actually change the underlying driver. Okay, so SQS does not support dispatching in batch, which is fine. We can do a for each. We can even do that. So that's the naive way of doing it, right? But I think a better way would be if we have a look at the async AWS client. Yeah, we can use async requests. How to use asynchronous features. So this one is synchronous, I believe. Okay, the HTTP request is not actually sent. Yeah, but okay, I want to run. Okay, I want to run all requests in parallel. So that's what I want. Of course, that's something I need to test out. Maybe I'm reading the documentation completely wrong. As you can expect, I'm really impatient when I'm using libraries like this. I copy paste code that I found online, and it's not something you should do. Okay, so this waits. Make sure all are executed, and then so that's timeout and download body. I don't want the body, and the timeout null, non-blocking. Yeah, no, 0. Okay. Wait until the end of the execution. Yeah, no, I don't want to block forever, and maybe that's something like 5 seconds, or there's something that could be configurable, right? And in any case, I need to read the documentation a little bit better. I just want to iterate quickly for now and design the API, get it right, and then all the details can be figured out later. That's important, not to get stuck on details. So that's a great way to use asynchronous requests and code to send all the HTTP requests in parallel. So hopefully that's much faster. If you have 10 messages to send, maybe it will take as long as one message. So that's okay. That could be done. Of course, this is not perfect rate limiting, and you may have noticed that because I'm simply delaying the message, and it could very well be that I have 10 messages in the hour, and I will delay all of them to the next hour, and so only one of them will be executed then. So that's not perfect, but I think for most scenarios it can do the job. I don't have any idea to do that better for now, to do like delaying in a proper way. I'm sure you can implement that if you know you have 1 record per hour. Yeah, I'm not even sure. And then exponential backoff. So that's something I've been thinking about. Right now the retries are handled by Lambda and SQS, and so whenever you have an error, then this will throw an exception and the message will be retried. And it will be retried after a delay that is configured on the SQS queue. Now, let's say the delay on the SQS queue is 1 minute, and I don't want to retry every minute. I want to retry the first time 1 minute and then increase the delay. So I thought about that, and one way could be, for example, to say, so you would have to try catch, and you could do that. So I want, instead of relying on the default timeout, I can do like 2 minutes. You could even take retry count and minutes, like every retry it's you double the time, and yeah, there you go. That's a possibility. And still rethrow the exception. Why? Because this will fail the execution, and the if we don't fail the execution, then Lambda and SQS will delete the message, so it will not be retried. The way it works is that SQS will retry the message if it was failed by Lambda. So we need to fail, and I simply rethrow the exception. I just force a delay, and I need to try that out. But from reading a lot of documentation yesterday and from my experience, I think this works because when using SQS and Lambda, whenever there's a failure, it simply releases the job. I mean, it doesn't do anything. So by us doing something, it should not conflict with how SQS and Lambda works. I need to try that out. So there we could have exponential backoff, and it's there could be a helper. Here I implemented it manually. It could be like SQS helper backoff record, and that logic could go inside the backoff method. It could even be like you say, okay, first retry is 1 minute, then it's 15 minutes, then it's 1 hour, and then backoff kick in like that. So that's an idea. So in the end, yes, you have to call some of that manually, but I prefer that because it gives you a bit more control. It's not implemented with a middleware and some configuration files. That way you can do anything you want. It's a controller, so it's where that kind of logic should be, in my opinion. It shouldn't be in a config file, because then you have I don't know, like 3 or 4 queues, and you want to have different behaviors for each queue. Like for the report, you want to have rate limiting and backoff, and for, I don't know, processing, sending emails, you don't really want the same kind of logic, right? So I think it makes sense. That's all for now, and I will see you next time with more problems. Thanks.